Here's my conversation this morning with Chris Vannini of The Athletic on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. All right, Chris, let's start with what happened earlier in the week. The Supreme Court rules that, college athletics and amateurism, and it's illegal. What you've been doing for a long time is illegal. What does this mean, and how long is it going to take to really figure out the answers to these questions about this situation?
Well, this isn't the landmark case that would end amateurism, but it opens the door for future cases that could. Essentially, the NCAA wanted to cap the amount of educational benefits schools can give players to keep everybody on the same level, essentially. And the Supreme Court ruled that that's basically antitrust. You can't price fix labor and that type of stuff. So now players can get laptops, tutors, study abroad, paid endorsements. If they hit an academic benchmark, they could get a $1,500 academic bonus in cash, essentially. So now schools will be able to do that. But Justice Kavanaugh, in his concurring opinion, basically threw the NCAA under the bus for everything that amateur represents, and it really was basically inviting future cases to come to the Supreme Court to at least show how he's going to rule. And considering this was a 9-0 decision, how it feels like this is the start toward some really, really major changes coming.
I love that Ken Pomeroy, quoted someone's tweet about the 9-0 ruling and said, hey, this is really going to affect the net for the NCAA coming up later in March. That was great. Okay, so in terms of paying college athletes, it sounds like it's not going to be straight cash, homie, like a job. It's going to come through educational benefits, as you mentioned, right?
Yes, for the most part. I mean, like I said, you can get up to $1,500 in cash for an academic bonus. That could be getting a 3.0 GPA. That could be graduating. I mean, you could make it attending class, honestly. I mean, schools could set it however they want. So could be an extra $1,500, but that's maybe double what they're getting the cost of attendance right now, the stipend that they get. But for the most part, it's going to be stuff like, computers, laptops. We'll see if schools and programs set up paid internships for certain places. I mean, it's college sports, so people are going to push these rules as far as they can go. But in terms of a school just straight up paying a player to come play for them, that is not the case yet.
Yeah, at least over the table. Under the table, perhaps, is whatever still, right? In terms of name, image, and likeness, this is separate. But how do you feel like in 8 days this is going to go down? Because we've not had federal rulings. A couple states have ruled, but not much. And then the NCAA hasn't said much either.
Yeah, I think we're up to 6 states that have July 1st as the start date where players will be able to do endorsements, essentially. And the NCAA was originally wanted to pass this in January, but then the Department of Justice stepped in and was concerned about antitrust stuff. So the NCAA held off on that, hoping to get a federal rule from Congress. That's not happening in time. It'll probably happen at some point, maybe by the end of the year. But July 1st is coming, and you're going to have schools in 6 of these states that can suddenly have their players do endorsements. And that is freaking a lot of coaches out who are concerned about what this could do for recruiting. And the NCAA Division I Council is going to meet this week, later this week or early next week, I think the 28th or something, to essentially try to pass something so this doesn't break NCAA rules. And it's going to be a pretty broad opening, kind of waivers for players who do this, and basically say schools can comply with state laws, because state laws supersede NCAA bylaws. And so we're going to get to an equal playing field at some point with the federal law. But when July 1st comes, get ready to see players on billboards across the South and all kinds of endorsements being promoted.
You want, guidelines and rules to a point, but you also don't want too many. But right now it feels like it's going to be pretty chaotic, where there's not a lot of ruling on how this is going to go, which is weird because we've been talking about it for feels like a year or two. Why hasn't this happened yet?
Well, because the NCAA was slow on this, and eventually the states got ahead of them. And like I said, the NCAA cannot overrule a state. And so now once states started getting on board, I think California or Florida might have been the first one like a year ago or something like that. Once states started getting on board, there was no stopping it for the NCAA, and they needed a federal law from Congress to kind of put everyone on the same playing field. But the Democrats and Republicans don't agree on the same things and what they want out of this. There's and now the door has been open to stuff like health benefits for players, and there's going to be a large scale, regulation of college sports from the federal government probably coming by the end of this year or going into next year. And it's all because the NCAA dragged its feet for so long and wouldn't change when it needed to change. And now all this is happening. It's just like the Supreme Court case too. That happened because the NCAA appealed the ruling, a lower court ruling that was somewhat favorable to them, but it wasn't favorable enough. So they appealed to the Supreme Court, and it blows up in their face. So this is, again, just complete organizational malpractice.
Yeah, super fun times. Chris Vannini from The Athletic is on BYU Sports Nation. Okay, let's talk about the 12-team playoff. This is sort of hidden for 2 years, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, 12 teams? I thought we were going to 8. What's the latest in this conversation as, Division I or FBS athletic directors, commissioners, chancellors want to try and, with the playoff committee, figure out whether this is actually going to happen and if it's 23 or 26?
Yeah, so last week, the management committee, which is the 10 FBS commissioners plus Notre Dame AD Jack Swarbrick, kind of approved the 12-team model to send to the board of managers, which is 10 FBS presidents or chancellors and the Notre Dame president, and here in Dallas. And yesterday they essentially approved to continue to look into that. Now they're going to go talk to players, they're going to talk to coaches, they're going to talk to TV, try to figure out how everybody feels about it. But 12 is the model that they're going to do. But when it starts is a big, big question, because the current TV contract with ESPN doesn't end until 2026, 5 years from now. The rotation of the bowls, because every, the semifinals, 2 bowls get a semifinal every year right now. That rotation would seem like 2023 is a possibility, but if you do that, ESPN has exclusive negotiating TV rights until the end of the deal, so you may not get as much money that way. There are contracts with the bowl games. You're talking about the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, various things. There's a 2024 championship game scheduled in Houston that's past 2023. So there are a lot of contracts and legal things that they need to get through to make this happen in time. And that was the message basically from the presidents yesterday, was that the lawyers told us there are a lot of things that we did not realize have to be taken care of in this. So in the end, do I think they figure it out and do it sooner than later? Probably, because I don't think they want to go 5 more years of this, having a plan set. But it's going to take a lot of, lawyer fees to kind of figure out how to make this work.
I think they have enough money to pay those fees, so I think it's going to be okay. But yes, there's a lot to figure out in this process. Okay, for the 12-team setup, at first I was like, 12, okay, 4 buys. I kind of like it. I also really like the idea of just the top 6 auto bids to the, champions of the top 6 ranked, conference champions. This obviously includes a group of 5 team, at least one. The Pac-12 complained, given on the heels of a season last year where the best team wasn't ranked that high, that they might have been on the outs looking in. What do you think of the setup initially for the proposal or recommendation of the 6 highest ranked conference champions getting auto bids?
The more I've thought about it, the more I love it. I was originally an 8-team person, 6 auto bids. Now the SEC was never going to go along with that because they wanted more at-large spots. But I think 12 ends up being the sweet spot because you have conference champions in. Most of them will get a bye, so there is something to play for in your conference championship game. And by having 12, essentially, if you're in the top 25 going into November, you've got a chance. And that makes a lot more games important. Now, there will be probably fewer super high-profile, iconic games that will have major implications, but we'll have more, upper middle tier games that are important. So I think 12 ends up being really the sweet spot that pleases everybody. As for the Pac-12 request to make the 5 auto bids for the Power 5, that has zero momentum from anybody else. It is not going to happen. It was essentially just kind of a really, really embarrassing thing for Larry Scott to do on his way out as Pac-12 commissioner.
And I agree. It's like, hey, just be better. If your team isn't in the top, 12, come on.
So not counting last year, because the Pac-12 played like 4 games.
Right.
The Pac-12 champion has always ranked in the top 12.
Yeah.
So it's like, it really wasn't an issue, and they just kind of made it one, and it looks bad.
It looked desperate. It really did. And on the way out, it's like, what do you care? You're on the way out. It's all good. We're talking to Chris Vannini of The Athletic. Okay, for a team like BYU, obviously a season like last year would have put BYU in the mix here. BYU didn't finish in a New Year's Six situation last year. A lot of mitigating factors in that, whatnot. But how does an independent team like BYU take advantage of this? And do you think BYU should consider a Group of 5 conference to better itself in the opportunity to get into the proposed 12-team playoff?
It's interesting. Had it been 8 teams, then BYU would be in a really, really tough spot. But because it's 12, essentially you got to get, as an at-large, you essentially got to get around number 10, number 12 in the rankings. And BYU can probably do that. It's going to be hard. Obviously, last year was as close as they've gotten in a while. But the door is open now. I think this really kind of slows the idea of some conference realignment because, if you're Boise State, you don't need to go to the American now because you have a path to the playoff. It's clearly there. If you're BYU, there is a very clear path as an independent. And that, Notre Dame, Notre Dame gave up a little bit to get a little bit in this, in that in order to get a bye, you have to be a conference champion. Notre Dame cannot do that. So they will never get a bye. But because there are 6 at-large spots, Notre Dame, if they have 1 loss, they're going to get in every year.
Yeah.
And so it helps them, I think, in the long term to get in there. And so if you're looking at BYU, essentially you got to get into the top 10 and you're probably in. And is that more likely than having to win your conference and be higher ranked than another conference champion? Maybe. It's kind of 2 different situations. I don't really know which one is better, but overall 12 I think is definitely helpful.
Yeah, 12 is going to be fun. I can't wait for that, whether it's in 23 or 26 or whatever. We'll figure it out. Chris, best of luck with everything covering the Group of 5s. I know you're a busy guy. We appreciate your time, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me.